You misunderstand Stoicism. Stoicism is not just about cool quotes with an AI picture on the screen, a muscle man created with AI telling you what to do, how to behave with girls, or saying, if you do this, do that, she will never leave you. I've read Marcus Aurelius's and Seneca's books and articles about other Stoicism followers. Believe me, this is not all about Stoicism. If you search for the core of Stoicism, you'll find that it has some complex views about God and a logical framework that underlies its nature-based approach to life. So boiling it down to just a couple of inspirational quotes really doesn't do it justice. That's why I made this The Real Stoicism video. By the end of this video, we will find answers to some questions. 1. What is Stoicism's historic background? 2. What is Stoicism's basic teachings? 3. Why are Roman Stoics much more popular than even the creator of Stoicism, Zeno? So by the end of this video, you will be able to answer all these questions. Let's begin. The first question: what is Stoicism's historic background? To answer that question, we need to find the creator of Stoicism. Our guy's name is Zeno of Citium. You might be expecting to hear Marcus Aurelius's name, but he is not the founder. The resources about Zeno are limited. He didn't write a book or anything, so everything we know about him comes from this book, Lives and Opinions of Eminent Philosophers, by Diogenes Laertius. As far as we know, Zeno was born in the Phoenician Greek city of Citium on Cyprus. His father was a merchant who traveled often, and Zeno naturally took up his father's profession. As a merchant, he would get goods from other cities with ships and sell them. Diogenes reports that Zeno's interest in philosophy began when he consulted the oracle of Delphi to know what he should do to attain the best life, and that the god's response was that he should take on the complexion of the dead. Whereupon, perceiving what this meant, he studied ancient authors. Zeno became a wealthy merchant, but one day, on a voyage from Phoenicia to Piraeus, his boat sank along with all of his cargo. He managed to survive, but because of this single event, he went from rich to poor suddenly. In contrast, he found his spiritual wealth thanks to this shipwreck. After that, he went to Athens and visited a bookseller. He picked up a copy of Xenophon's Memorabilia and was so impressed by the portrayal of Socrates that he asked the bookseller where men like Socrates were to be found. Just then, Crates of Thebes happened to be walking by, and the bookseller pointed to him. Crates, the most famous cynic living at that time in Greece. Shortly, cynicism teaches that people should reject material wealth, social status, and traditional desires, focusing instead on living in harmony with nature and being self-sufficient. It kinda looks like Stoicism, but is much stricter with some rules. Anyway, let's keep going with the original story. From the days Zeno studied under Crates of Thebes, he showed a strong bent for philosophy. Then he found himself some other philosophers apart from Crates, like Stilpo, the Megarian, and Polemo. From each of these men, he learned some different aspect and nuance of the life of a philosopher. After many years of study, Zeno began teaching in the Agora of Athens known as the Stoa Poikile in 301 BC. His disciples were initially called Zenonians, but eventually they came to be known as Stoics, which was a name previously applied to poets who congregated in the Stoa Poikile. So Zeno set up his own school and began to teach his philosophy to the world. He was affected by the old academy as ideas, so that he divided philosophy into three parts: logic, physics, and ethics. I will explain these parts. But before that, I want to talk a bit more about Zeno's school. By the way, the Old Academy was founded by Plato, and also it was variously known as Plato's Academy. We can clearly see that Zeno was affected by philosophers like Plato and Socrates. Anyway, after Zeno's death, he was succeeded in the leadership of the Stoa first by Cleanthes of Assos, and then by Chrysippus of Soli, who headed the school from around 230 until 206 BCE and was, by all accounts, its foremost theorist and systematizer. So his works are vital for Stoicism history. Following Chrysippus, the position of scholarch passed to many other followers, and it continued its activities. So Stoicism's early history was like that. Before diving into the basis of Stoic philosophy, if you are interested in these kind of philosophy or beliefs topics, I made a video about Buddhism's history and beliefs. You can check out that video, of course, after watching this one. Now, I am sure you are asking yourself, where is Marcus Aurelius or Seneca or Epictetus? The answer is, they were called Roman Stoics, and Stoicism was very fashionable in their period, but before that we better learn Stoicism's basis, which we divided into 3 parts. Our next question, what is Stoicism's basic teachings? As you remember, we divided as logic, physics, and ethics. First of all, these concepts includes more things than you think. That's why you shouldn't just think it is simply science or mathematics. For example, logic was a wide subject that including not only formal reasoning but also rhetoric, grammar, epistemology, and what we might now call philosophy of language, including extensive theories of language and meaning. Besides, physics was not just science. It included topics traditionally covered by natural philosophy, and it is where the Stoics developed their ontology and metaphysics. And ethics was about the end goal of which was to achieve good spirit or happiness through the right way of living according to nature. You might be familiar with the ethics part due to the happiness advices in Stoicism, and it's been pushing up by other YouTube channels. But logic and physics are also important in Stoicism philosophy. So let's start with logic. Zeno urged the need to lay down a basis for logic because the wise person must know how to avoid deception. This wisdom state was called Stoic sage, which Cicero relates that Zeno would illustrate as follows. He would display his hand in front of one with the finger stretched out and say, "A visual appearance is like this." Next, he closed his fingers a little and said, "An act of assent is like this." Then he pressed his fingers closely together and made a fist and said that that was comprehension. But then he used to apply his left hand to his right fist and squeeze it tightly and forcibly, and then say that such was knowledge, which was within the power of nobody save the wise man. To reach that level wisdom, you need to benefit from rhetoric, grammar, epistemology, and propositional logic. Stoic logic is the system of propositional logic developed by the Stoic philosophers, especially by Chrysippus in ancient Greece. It was one of the 2 great systems of logic in the world. The other one was Aristotle's term logic. Aristotle focused on statements that say something either is or isn't something else, and these statements stay true or false no matter when you say them. So he tried to understand terms itself. In contrast, Stoic logic was based on the analysis of propositions rather than terms. In this logic, the basic building block is called an assertable, which is just a simple statement like, "It is day." And assertables have a truth value such that they are only true or false depending on when it was expressed. The best example for this is the assertable, "It is night," will only be true if it is true that it is night. In addition, compound assertables can be built up from simple ones through the use of logical connectives. So this is not everything about logic part, but I did my best to make it simpler and gave you the basics of it. Even this might be confusing, however, don't worry, Stoic logic made it difficult for its students even within the Stoic school. Now it is time for the physics part. Stoic physical theory included topics traditionally covered by natural philosophy, and it is where the Stoics developed their ontology and metaphysics. Stoic physics plays an important role in shaping their ideas about ethics. It also connects with some of their ideas about logic and language, so you better watch this part closely to understand ethics part much better. Stoic philosophy had a radical materialist view, which is they believed only bodies exist. This might sound strange, but for them, existence meant having the ability to act or be acted upon. You may think Stoic didn't believe metaphysical things like God or soul, but in Stoicism, even abstract concepts like wisdom are considered bodily. While only bodies truly exist, the Stoics recognized a fascinating category of entities that subsist rather than fully exist. These 4 special incorporeal entities are void, place, time, and lecta. Void is an empty space that can receive bodies. It has no shape, cannot act or acted upon, also essential for allowing movement in the universe. Place is receptor of bodies and provides spatial context. Time, understanding the incorporeal status of time is trickier. Some of what we might consider aspects of time are uncontroversially bodies, day and night, or years, for example. We are also told that the past and the future subsist while the present obtains or is realized. It is a bit complicated one. As the final kind, lecta, the most enigmatic incorporeal. It is usually translated as sayables, so it is related to linguistic expressions, which means it represents the content of thoughts and impressions. That's why we can say it plays a huge role in communication. To explain the creation and nature of the universe, the Stoics developed another complex philosophical framework, the active and passive principle. The active principle is the dynamic creative force of the universe. It also identified as God or Zeus. It shapes and organizes the passive principle, which also called primary matter. Primary matter is eternal, unqualified, formless, and inert. It is suffused throughout by the active principle in order to create objects in the world. You can think primary matter like malleable clay and the active principle as a divine sculptor. The sculptor continuously shaping and reshaping an eternal. The active and the passive principles in this way both create the cosmos and all objects in it. The Stoics stress that they are entirely blended or mixed through and through. That's why they believe two bodies could be in the same place at the same time. Central to all this process is pneuma, which is literally breath. It is a kind of cosmic animating force. Pneuma moves simultaneously inward and outward and passes through all other bodies. In its outward motion, it gives them the qualities that they have, and in its inward motion makes them unified objects. Pneuma has three levels. Inanimate objects, basic holding or stability. Plants adds a level of nature or growth potential. Animals introduces soul, the highest form of pneumatic energy. On the other hand, the four classical elements, fire, air, water, and earth, play a crucial role in Stoic physical theory. Unlike the completely formless passive principle, the elements possess qualities. For example, fire is hot and air is cold. Yet, curiously, these elements also seem to create the fundamental principles themselves. The active principle is said to be made up of fire and air, while matter is sometimes said to be made up of water and earth. At the heart of Stoic cosmology lies a vision of cosmic cycle. The universe experiences an endless destruction and rebirth, and the elements, especially fire, play a central role in this cycle. This cycle made up from two stages. Sometimes everything turns into conflagration, which is everything is fire. Other times the world exists as we know it, with order and balance. Between these phases, the four elements come together to form the universe again. For the last topic of physics, I want to review of Stoics' God opinions. I've already told that the active principle is identified as God. Also, the Stoics used a powerful biological metaphor to explain God's creative power. God is like sperm or seed that contains the first principles or directions of everything that will develop. Just as a seed contains the complete blueprint for a plant's growth, the divine fire contains the rational plan for the entire cosmos. So that also explains the deterministic universe philosophy. The Stoics believed the present is fully determined by past events. They say that every cause is a body which becomes the cause to a body of something incorporeal. This causal chain is inescapable and forms what they called fate. Fate is the rational working out of God's will, creating a natural, everlasting ordering of the whole. So this is all about the Stoic physics. It's kind of hard to understand, but it forms one of the crucial bases of Stoic philosophy. That means it is important to learn it well. Anyway, let's keep with the last part, which is ethics. Stoic ethic is based on happiness. To be able to reach that happiness, you need to act virtuously, which means you have to live according to nature. This nature contains both human nature and universal nature. The Stoics believed nature is inherently good because the universe was created by things which can be identified as God, and also God is present in every particle of the universe. That's why living in agreement with nature is virtuously. In fact, Stoics took a radical position on virtue. We attach our happiness unintentionally into external things like wealth and health, but for Stoics only virtue is good, vice is bad, and everything else is indifferent to happiness. In Stoic thinking, wealth, health, reputation, etc. neither benefit nor harm your true happiness. So they are not obligations, they just benefits you. Despite calling things like health indifferent, Stoics weren't saying we shouldn't care about them. They classified indifference into preferred indifference, health, wealth, etc., that have value and align with nature, dispreferred indifference, illness, poverty, etc. A virtuous person will normally pursue preferred indifference, but understands that actually getting them doesn't affect true happiness. Also, vice can be defined as the rejection of the reason, as virtue can only exist within the dominion of the reason. Moreover, all actions are simply categorized as either good or bad. That's why no moral action can be considered more virtuous than another. Zeno thinks we have to have more responsibility for our emotions and desires since they arise from our free consent. He also identified 4 negative emotions: desire, fear, pleasure, sorrow. He balanced these with 3 corresponding positive emotions: will, caution, and joy. Though interestingly, he provided no rational equivalent for pain. The Stoic path to becoming virtuous requires us to completely remove all thinking errors, not just ignore them temporarily. These flawed patterns of thought must be replaced with right reason, which alone can guide us toward virtue and away from vice. So it was the end of the ethics part and also end of Stoicism's basic teachings. It was a tough part, I am not going to lie. But now it is time for Roman Stoics. Stoicism became the foremost popular philosophy among the educated elite in the Roman Empire. Even some of the rulers of the empire embrace it. And even today, most of the philosopher names you've heard as Stoics, like Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus, lived in the Roman Empire. So there must be something they did to achieve this glory, right? Then our next question is, why are Roman Stoics much more popular than even the creator of Stoicism, Zeno? To answer that question, I will talk about 4 big Roman Stoics: Musonius Rufus, Seneca, Epictetus, and Marcus Aurelius. I will briefly talk about their life and their daily Stoic practices, which are one of the reasons Stoicism has become so popular today. Anyway, let's start with Musonius Rufus. Musonius Rufus was an important Stoic teacher in ancient Rome. His life was kind of challenging because he was exiled multiple times by different emperors but always maintained his respected reputation. He was a significant philosopher for Stoicism. In my opinion, he is the biggest reason why Stoicism is so popular even today. His importance comes from 2 main reasons. He taught Epictetus, and Epictetus was the greatest influence on Emperor Marcus Aurelius. But the main reason is not that. The main reason is he believed philosophy should be practical and useful in daily life. He focused on ethics over logic or physics. He thought philosophy had to direct people to goodness and virtue by using ethical practices. As a result, he developed 2 types of practice: mental training through reflection and implementing good life principles, and developing resilience to physical pain that affects both mind and body. Also, he believed the equality between men and women, so they both should be trained in philosophy. He has many other small practices, but these general ideas are enough to understand the main concept. Anyway, our next philosopher is Seneca. Seneca and Musonius had similar experiences when it came to exile. Seneca pursued a career in politics and became a high-ranking financial clerk. He was pleased with his life and expecting to go on this way, but you can't always get what you want. His life took a sharp turn in 41 AD. Claudius became emperor, and Seneca was accused by the new empress of adultery with the emperor's niece. He sentenced to death, but Claudius commuted to exile. Then Seneca spent the next 8 years on the island of Corsica. In 49 AD, Claudius married Agrippina, and through her influence, Seneca was recalled to Rome. Agrippina appointed him tutor and advisor to his son, the future Emperor Nero. Nero later became one of Rome's most infamous tyrants, casting further doubt on Seneca's moral character and influence. In 65 AD, Nero thought Seneca was part of a plot against him, and he ordered him to kill himself. Seneca followed tradition by severing several veins in order to bleed to death. After his death, Seneca was an influence on notable figures such as Erasmus, Francis Bacon, Pascal, Montaigne down to modern days. His most widely read and influential text is the Letters to Lucilius. So Seneca's life thus unfolded as a complex mix of philosophical ideals and political compromises. Time for the next philosopher, which is Epictetus. Epictetus' story is a bit different from the others. Seneca, Musonius, and Marcus, they all had challenging lives, yet they still managed to have some kind of wealth. On the other hand, Epictetus was just a slave. This also shows that Stoicism is not just for elite, educated people. It was meant for everyone, regardless of their social status and wealth. Anyway, let's continue with Epictetus. Epictetus spent his youth in Rome as a slave to a wealthy man who was secretary to Emperor Nero. Early in life, Epictetus acquired a passion for philosophy, and with the permission of his master, he studied Stoic philosophy under Musonius Rufus. Sometime after Emperor Nero's death, Epictetus obtained his freedom and began to teach Stoicism in Rome for nearly 25 years. Well, nothing lasts forever. Around AD 93, the Roman Emperor Domitian banished all philosophers from Rome, and Epictetus moved to Greece, where he founded a philosophy school and taught there until his death. Epictetus developed practical techniques for applying Stoic principles to daily challenges and also created a systematic approach to practicing Stoicism that was accessible to ordinary people. Moreover, he refined the central Stoic concept that some things are up to us while others are not, and his famous quote, which is, "Some things are within our power while others are not," verifies that concept. It is time for the last philosopher and, of course, the famous one, Marcus Aurelius. When you say Stoicism, Marcus Aurelius comes to mind. According to Machiavelli, he was the last really good leader of Rome. If you don't know Machiavelli, I made a video about him, and I would suggest you to watch that after this video. So Marcus Aurelius is perhaps the best-known Stoic leader in history. But how did he manage to have this kind of fame? He was born in a well-respected family, but nobody at the time would have predicted that he would one day be emperor of the empire. But you never know what life has in store for you. He was adopted by Emperor Antoninus Pius as his heir, and when it's time, he became Roman emperor and ruled until his death. Marcus ruled for nearly 2 decades, and his reign was far from easy. He had been through many wars, financial crises, the rise of Christianity, and the plague that left numerous dead, which made everything much harder. So, it is important to realize the gravity of that position and the magnitude of power that Marcus possessed. He held the most powerful position in the world at the time, so he had to maintain a strong philosophical outlook to rule with wisdom and restraint. To achieve this, he was educated by the best tutors of his day and embraced Stoicism early in life. The teachings of Epictetus particularly influenced him. Marcus wrote his personal philosophical reflections likely while on military campaigns. These notes, titled Meditations, were never intended for publication but became one of the most influential Stoic texts. In these private journals, he reminded himself of Stoic principles and how to maintain virtue amid hardship. If you had to read only one book, I would absolutely recommend Meditations. You could see what goes through the Stoic emperor's mind. So these were 4 big Stoic philosophers in Rome. Now let's answer our question. Why are Roman Stoics much more popular than even the creator of Stoicism, Zeno? If you watch this video closely, you'll figure out that Roman Stoics used Stoicism to create daily practices. There was an emptiness due to lack of a certain religion, and Roman Stoics developed some beneficial principles to use in daily life, and that led to fill the emptiness in people. You can clearly see that the rise of Christianity in Rome had began during Marcus Aurelius, and after him there are no more significant Roman Stoics. So that emptiness made Stoicism much more popular and led to its development. With that, we answered all of our questions. So now you've learned what Stoicism is and its history. It helped many people get through difficult times. I really recommend reading some books like Meditations and Letters from a Stoic, and using some of their practices in your daily life might be helpful to overcome hard times. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. See you in the next one.